Thank you very much for joining me on this video. You know, it's been said when you purchase your principal residence, you're purchasing with a lot of emotion. When you're purchasing an investment property, however, you're purchasing with a lot of logic. And while there's an element of truth in that, it's not the whole story. I want you to think back to when you bought your home, if you have bought a home, or if you're dreaming of buying a home, the process that you're planning on. You've got a picture in mind. It may be a Norman Rockwell painting picture. You may picture a white picket fence, and you maybe picture a wraparound porch with a swing set on the porch. You might picture a lovely garden with flowers and a curving path to the driveway. You walk in the front door and there's a sweeping staircase into the family room and the kitchen. Maybe it's all open concept. You've got an idea of what you want. Now, from a real estate perspective, we know that often you don't buy the picture you have in mind. But you don't just buy utility. You need a roof over your head. You need a furnace that's functional. You need a kitchen and a bathroom and a bedroom. You need some components. But you don't need the swing set, the wraparound porch. You don't need the flower beds. You don't need these things. These are things that you want. These are an extension of yourself. We would call those pride of ownership. And if you drive around a neighborhood, it's not difficult to discern who has pride of ownership and who doesn't. You drive by one house and it's a showpiece. You drive by another one and the garden's all overgrown with weeds. Maybe the drapes are hanging limp in the windows. Maybe it's badly in need of paint. Maybe there's a car parked on the lawn or up on blocks. And it's clear that they don't have pride of ownership. So you can see that when you are looking in a neighborhood of people who live in the homes. But I believe that the same thing is true when you're looking at investment properties. As you continue on the Money Machine seminar and practice the principles I share with you, your investment portfolio is going to grow. 1 property, 2 properties, 5 properties, 10 properties. And I want you to imagine now that you've got a fairly robust portfolio, would you want to take a bus tour and take people around, maybe not inside, and drive by your investment properties and show off what you have? Would you be proud of ownership? Maybe you would, and maybe you wouldn't. If you're just buying for cash flow, just buying the numbers, the chances are you're not going to be thrilled with the property. It's going to look like those properties as I told you about in the single family home area where they're not being looked after. There are weeds in the garden and there's a car up on blocks and the drapes hanging limply in the window, and it's just going to look run down. And you're going to say, well, it doesn't matter. It provides shelter and it provides warmth. It provides the basic necessities of life. And while that's true, it isn't going to attract the quality of tenants that you're looking for. And if you get the quality of tenant, they're not going to maintain a property when the landlord doesn't care. So it's really important to have the right kind of property. Now, I understand too that many landlords start out with pride of ownership and they let go of that dream because they've had 1 or 2 tenants who just flat out don't care. And the landlord maybe puts in a flower bed and maybe gets a landscaping company to set it up and turns it over to the tenant, and the tenant doesn't look after it at all. Or maybe he does beautiful things in the interior and the tenant lets it run down. And the landlord's attitude becomes, well, why bother? They're just going to ruin it anyway. And so he concentrates on providing the necessities, but he doesn't concentrate on pride of ownership. And I want to tell you that that is a mistake. I think what we need to do as landlords right from the get-go is keep in mind return. We want this thing to be a business. We want this thing to pay off and carry the mortgage and one day provide us a wonderful stream of passive income on retirement. But more than that, we also want to make sure that we've got a fleet of properties that we're proud of. So start right out by buying right. Go by the numbers, but not just the numbers. Buy quality. Is the building quality or is it poorly constructed and cobbled together? Buy in a quality neighborhood. Is the neighborhood upperly mobile or is it deteriorating? Are the other homes in the neighborhood or multifamily homes, whatever they are they well kept or are they in bad repair? So you want to look after that. Is it the best property you can get within the zoning that allows, if you're looking for a duplex or a triplex, whatever you're looking for? And then select right. This is hugely important. You want to select the right tenant. So meet the tenant, show the property, get an application, be thorough on the application, and then follow up on the application. Contact the past landlords as well as the current landlord. And if there's any question in mind at all, if they're renting a single family or semi-detached, drive by and take a look at how the property they're living in now looks, because that'll be an extension of how your property looks. I remember having a application from a tenant, and they were looking at renting a semi-detached that I had, and I just had a little bit of niggling doubt in my mind, so I drove by where they were. Well, it was a mess. There was garbage in the yard, there was garbage in the garden was all overgrown with weeds, there was a car up on blocks. I didn't even need to look any further on the application. I got my answer. Sometimes I've gone actually to the tenant's apartment where they're living and had a look at how they live. I've asked if that's okay, and I take a look. You want to pick the right tenant, you want to do your homework. And when you do get a problem tenant, and from time to time it's going to happen, you need to stay on top of it. Sometimes, and that's what happens with landlords. They have one or two, and then they get disheartened. When you have a bad tenant, and I know the Residential Tenancy Act is stacked very heavily in favor of the tenant, but you need to go through the process, address it, and then once you get rid of the bad tenant, you need to correct the damage that was done, show once again the pride of ownership in the property, and go back into selecting the tenant properly. I have a lovely north end back split, and I got a complaint call from some neighbors. They said the place is run down and neglected. Well, the tenant had been there 10 years. That isn't the typical what the tenant did. I drove by and I was getting an accurate report. It was a mess. I got a hold of the tenant, found out that his wife had died. I knew that. He now had a girlfriend. He was spreading his time between that place and his girlfriend's, had his daughter move in with her kids, and it was turning into a shambles. And I said to him, you either need to move in or move out. We need to address this. And it's sometimes a challenge, it's sometimes a process. And as landlords, we don't like that. But you need to stay on top of it. You need to do that so that you can enjoy pride of ownership. Now, it may be that your properties are never going to be on the cover of Homes and Gardens. I understand that. They are rental properties. But if you maintain this attitude of pride of ownership, we enjoy a very, very low vacancy rate right now as landlords. And so you can rent almost anything without much grief. But it isn't always going to be that way. It vacillates. And sometimes there's more vacancy, and you see advertisements on as you drive around in apartment buildings and so on, vacancy or 1 month free or whatever. And as the climate changes and more units are built, it may be that there's a bigger selection for tenants, and they're going to overlook yours if the pride of ownership isn't there. So it's important to buy right and maintain right and be enjoying as a landlord a reasonable cash flow, but also enjoying as a landlord the portfolio that you have. Thank you very much for joining me in this video. I look forward to talking to you again next week.